Greetings and welcome, or welcome back. Before we begin, please take a moment to hit that like button. Maybe consider subscribing to the channel. Remember, your sacrifice keeps the YouTube algorithm demons happy. Now, on with the story. The Zhu Chang Saga, a story by user Hume Reddit, and an integral part of the Jenkinsverse by Phillip Johnson. Chapter 4, The Ox's Plan, Part 3 of 3. Regaari stormed through the corridors of the rich plains on his way to the bridge. His left arm hung limply at his side. He hadn't been hit directly by the pulse blast, but the nimbus was enough to shatter his elbow. He'd find out later if it could be repaired or if he'd be looking at a replacement. Right now, he had things to take care of. The pain wasn't useful, so he ignored it, gripping his rifle tightly in his good hand. The broad doors leading to the bridge parted before him. Like everything else, the bridge was scaled for Governor Agavendrigan, so Regaari wouldn't have been surprised if the bridge crew, most sometimes indulged in outdoor sports in the vast area. On the forward screen, the Hunter assault ship was visible, a menacing but oddly idle thing hanging in space. The captain turned at the Gowan's entrance. "Officer Regaari, what is the status of—" "Why have we not docked with the Hunter ship?" Regaari interrupted. He gestured at the screen with his pulse rifle. "Sister Shu is still aboard, and the fact that the Hunters haven't resumed their assault means she still has them occupied. We must take the initiative." "What?" Acton McTicky said, horrified. "You want me to dock with a Hunter ship? Voluntarily?" "Yes," Regaari said flatly. "But by all means," he brought up the pulse rifle in his good arm, "consider involuntarily an option." Ayma wet the cloth in her paw and gently cleaned the blood from Zhu's face. When the team returned from braving the innards of the Hunter raiding ship, a team mostly made up of Gowans, she thought proudly, it was bearing Zhu's inert form, requiring all of them to lift. At first, she didn't know where the keening was coming from. Then Regaari had looked at her, and she realized the sound was coming from herself. "She's alive, Mother Ayma," he'd said. His arm hung loosely at his side, and he wasn't able to help carry the injured human, but he demanded the right to go along and offer his rifle. "But we must get her to the medical bay quickly." They hurried towards the medical center, and Ayma dashed ahead to find a hovercart and bring it to them. Once Zhu was laid out in the cart, they could move much faster, and it was easier to see Zhu's injuries, which made it so much worse. Crimson blood leaked from the human's nose, mouth, and even her eyes, and it was horrible to see. She gently held Zhu's hand, running alongside the hovercart until they entered the medical bay. Then she found herself roughly pushed aside. "Get out of the way!" demanded Tra, the shipboard doctor. Ayma almost slashed at him with her claws, but Regaari caught her before she could do anything rash. "Come, Mother Ayma, we can watch from out of the way," he said gently, ushering her to the side, near the wall where he'd propped up his pulse rifle. The Corti's black, bottomless eyes cast over the Gowan officer. "You require attention, Officer Regaari. One of my assistants will treat you." "I will wait for you to become available." "Don't be ridiculous. The human will occupy my efforts." "I will wait, Doctor," Regaari replied. His ears were flicked forward nonchalantly, but his teeth bared briefly, and his good paw rested on the butt of his rifle. "Only the best for me." Tra snorted. "Very well, but if your stubbornness costs you your arm, don't complain to me later." Then the Corti was gesturing impatiently at his assistants, under the watchful and slightly hostile gaze of the two Gowans. Time lost meaning as they watched the Corti and his team work on Zhu. Words were tossed around that Ayma didn't like the sound of. Cerebral hemorrhaging, internal bleeding, and bone fracture. But the steady confidence of Tra was comforting, even if she didn't much care for his species. Eventually, the Corti put away his instruments and dismissed the others, sending them off to deal with the other, less pressing injuries that had been suffered among the crew. Tra pushed Zhu's bed over himself, where the hovering platform automatically connected to the display on the wall, showing the unconscious human's vitals on the holographic panel. The Corti turned to the pair of Gowans. "Now, Officer Regaari, shall we see if your stubbornness has resulted in permanent nerve damage?" "Sister Shu will recover?" the male asked. Of course, the Corti sniffed. She had me treating her. Regaari sighed at the doctor's arrogance, but let him lead him over to another hover bed to have his elbow examined. Ayma crept over to Zhu's bed, looking down at the deceptively fragile figure. The skin of her face was pale, paler than Ayma had ever seen, and it made the bruising around Zhu's eyes all the more lurid. Her forearm was in an anti-kinetic brace, preventing it from moving while the human's bones mended themselves, while the other was wrapped in regenerative bandages. Of all the injuries, Ayma found herself concerned for Zhu's arm. The bandages should prevent scarring, but she would worry until she could see for herself. She didn't want her friend to suffer permanent damage for having saved all of them. For all that Zhu was giving and selfless, she could be surprisingly vain about her appearance. The way she'd worry over her head fur and skin, and the odd, funny treatments she'd devised for both, had been the subject of good-natured teasing back at the commune. Ayma sighed, pressing some buttons on the wall, which caused a chair to pop out and configure itself to her anatomy. Sitting down, she prepared to wait. Her vigil remained undisturbed. Most of the worst injuries, the ones that didn't mean instant death, had already been treated, and the rest were minor things which didn't require a prolonged stay in the medical bay. The odd crew member would look over curiously at the lone human and her Gowan guard, but Ayma would glare at them until they scurried off. Regaari merely gave her a nod as he left the bay, his arm encased in his own brace. Apparently Tra had judged that the joint was salvageable. Ayma nodded back with gratitude. The crew who wandered by to see the injured human, yes, humans could be hurt, angered Ayma. But the sapients she didn't see angered her to the point of spitting. Where was Furfeg? Where was the Rich Plains captain? They owed their lives, the continued existence of their ship, to the human laying on the hoverbed beside her. They could at least check on her. Eventually, the events of the day and her anger wore the Gowan mother out, and she fell asleep in the chair, comforted by the presence of another female. Ayma. The Gowan jerked awake. She blinked and looked over to find Zhu's head turned towards her, her dark eyes glittering in the medical bay's lights. Ayma stood, trying not to notice how the bruises around Zhu's eyes had darkened. She reached a paw out and took hold of the human's hand. "Oh good, you're awake." Zhu glanced around the bay with the hollow curiosity of complete exhaustion. "We won," she rasped. It was on the tip of her muzzle to say, "You won," but she knew better. "Yes, we did." "How many?" She squeezed Zhu's hand softly, not that even her full strength would be noticeable to the human. 16, but another 200 is safe. Rest, Zhu, and get better. She leaned in, speaking quietly. The physician is Corti, but he's past the vetting process required to work for Furfeg, and I'll be keeping an eye on him. Zhu shifted her arms, her expression turning quizzical as she noticed the small humming units and its attached feeds to her arm. An infuser, Ayma explained. It's providing moisture and nutrients to you until you are well enough to eat unaided. She hesitated, then forced some joviality into her voice. Really, Zhu, the distances you'll go to avoid eating your nutrient spheres. Zhu blinked slowly, then smiled. It seemed easier than getting them to cook my food properly. Well, you're turning my fur white before my time. Can't have that. Not if you're going to seduce Regaari. Her muzzle dropped open. Shoo! She sputtered. Further proving the stars were out to get her, the subject of Zhu's jibe chose that moment to walk in. Oh good, you're both awake. Good morning. Morning? Ayma glanced at the time displayed above Zhu's hoverbed. Had she really slept half a day? Regaari came to a stop next to them. He ducked his head in greeting to both females, and particularly deeply to Zhu. Sister Zhu, I'm glad to see you awake. Her eyes looked at his arm, and he lifted it with a small wince of pain. Winged by a hunter pulse blast, he explained, almost sheepishly. The joint won't need to be replaced, although I must keep it immobilized, for a couple of 10 days at least. It could have been much worse. Ayma shuddered in agreement. Worse, when it came to hunters, didn't necessarily mean dying. He hesitated. Related to that, Mother Ayma, I must speak to you. She gestured, but he shook his head. No, alone, please. The slender strips of fur over Zhu's eyes lifted, and Ayma knew the human well enough to interpret the gesture. Don't start, she admonished, drawing a weak grin from Zhu and a confused look from Regaari. Very well, Officer Regaari, we can speak in the corner there. As for you, she pointed at Zhu, go to sleep. Yes, Mother, Zhu replied with a whine that could have come from Yun, though her lips were tilted to indicate humor. Her eyelids drooped obediently. Ayma walked through the corridors of the ship, making friendly gestures to the crew as she passed. They were all stressed and harried, and she had no desire to add to their burdens. So she hid the anger that seethed inside her, the desire to hiss and spit right there in the middle of the corridor. She knew that if she started, she'd likely end up sedated in the medical bay next to Zhu. She'd had to consult a shipboard map to find Furfeg's quarters. They were located near the greenhouse in the belly of the ship, the place that Governor Agavendrigan would feel most comfortable. Well, he wouldn't feel comfortable for long if she had any say. When she approached the doors, she barely waited for them to slide open, plowing in without regard for protocol or politeness. Furfeg sat near a large table, his bulk resting on a bench. Action McTicky stood nearby, likely giving the diplomat a report on the state of the rich plains. Both looked up as she entered, the captain's long, slender neck swinging around in surprise. "Ah, Mother Ayma," Furfeg began. "I was just speaking to the captain about the disposition of the hunter's ship." "Get out!" she told Acton's McTicky. "Excuse me?" the uniformed architect replied, blinking at being ordered about on his own ship. "You heard me. I will speak to Diplomat Furfeg, and I don't think he will want you here for it." Acton McTicky gave the huge diplomat an incredulous look, but Furfeg was watching Ayma carefully. Eventually, the great shaggy head bobbed in assent. "I think it best if I speak with her. Signal the Dominion fleet and have them deal with the derelict. I think it best that it be towed back to Gao, but I will leave it to your superiors to decide." The captain paused. "Very well." His long neck bowed briefly to Furfeg, and again to Ayma. The large door whispered as he left. Furfeg waited until the door sealed before speaking again. "Very well, Mother Ayma, what can—" "Why did you change the transponder frequency?" she demanded. His flanks turned a soft orange. "Pardon?" She stomped towards him, not caring that he was nearly 3 times her height. She pointed at the deck as if accusing it, and her claws peeked out of their sheaths. "The transponder frequency for this ship was changed when we left Gao. Changed at your orders." "That's hardly unusual. Ships will change frequency depending on the sector they're in, to avoid conflict with other vessels. It's purely routine." "Except the frequency you changed it to is one that has been shown to have a correlation with hunter attacks over the last 2 standard years. There are travel advisories warning against using it. The hunters found us because we were waving a flag at them. Why?" "Mother Ayma, I understand that you are quite upset, and understandably. Your friend lies injured." "My sister lies injured," she snapped. "Injured saving all of us, including you." Her voice became a growl as she snarled and spat. "You've been involved with the Gowans for nearly 30 standard years. You know what will happen if I decide you had any hand in those injuries, directly or not." He watched her carefully. His flanks had turned a pale gray. "She is not Gowan," he said. "She was not born on Gao, but she is my sister." There it is! He surged to his feet, his bench nearly toppling. His bulk loomed over her, and she was suddenly intensely aware of how small she was. His wide-set eyes blazed, and he pointed at her with a shaggy arm. His flanks glowed a bright blue, jubilant. That is what I need, Mother Ayma. That is what we all need. Ayma took a timid step back. What? The big herbivore began to pace his quarters. Do you ever wonder how a species like the humans could have ever survived long enough to become sapient? What? What does that have to do with... Furfeg rolled on as if she hadn't even spoken. They are ferociously competitive. They are hardly the first competitive species to arrive in the galaxy, not even the first omnivores. But most species with such a mindset are either swarms, like the hunters, or solitary in nature, like the Corti. The easiest way to deal with competitors is either to destroy them or avoid them. The humans have done neither, at least not deliberately. Why do you think that is? They are neither herd animals nor solitary. They are small group sociable. A human cannot stand to be alone, nor can they stand to be a nameless face in the crowd. They need to be surrounded by faces they know, by beings they care about and who care about them. They need family. The secret to their success is their families and the fact that there is nothing they will not do for the sake of their family. And you, Mother Ayma, have made this discovery purely by accident. Furfeg was pacing his office, gesturing broadly. Ayma stood as still as possible. Governor Agavendrigan were herd animals, and a panicked herd animal is dangerous, no matter how civilized. Ayma could tell that Furfeg was treading the edge. What do you mean? She asked carefully, voice artificially calm. You found a human, and you adopted her. She is cut off from her species, her world. But your presence, your acceptance salves the wound. This fear of the humans, we snatched them from their world. They're experimented upon, then tossed aside alone, and kept that way. And we wonder why so many act badly. For Shu, her loyalty, this need for family and friendship has transferred to you and your clan. There is nothing she would not do for her family. We've seen that. She didn't like how cynical and exploitative he made that sound. The Gowan people are no different. We stand with our clans. Exactly. Your people are unique in the galaxy to understand the humans, and that understanding may save us all. Furfeg, you're not making any sense. He halted his pacing, and his flanks rippled with gray, dark blue with spots of white and green. Resignation, misery, and fear. My people have made a mistake, Mother Ayma. A terrible mistake, and I don't think they've even realized it. Counselor Vedrig suspects, perhaps, but even he was unable to prevent it from happening. Ayma completely agreed, but it was clear there was more to it. What kind of mistake? She asked carefully. Furfig paused, visibly putting his words together. If one of my people was taken by the Corti, we would regret the loss, but be more concerned with the safety of our people as a whole. we would not pursue the matter in the interests of protecting our people in total. The Corti themselves hardly care if one of their own is kidnapped or killed. Two different approaches, but the same end result. Ayma bobbed her head to show her understanding. Now, what would happen if I were to threaten you in front of your commune, or Officer Regaari in front of his clan? She hesitated. You would likely regret it. Exactly. If you were alone, you would simply avoid or escape the situation. A threat to your people is too abstract, but if someone were to threaten you or your sisters in view of the others, you would act. You will defend your clan, your families, and like in so very many things, the humans have the same traits, taken to the extreme. He halted, and his sides flushed dark blue spotted with white, like stars in an evening sky. The translator gave his voice a quake when he spoke again. My people have imprisoned 7 billion humans, and almost every single one of those humans has family they care about. Suddenly, Furfeg's near panic was quite understandable. Then, why the transponder, Furfeg? He gestured helplessly. Zhu was the perfect human to plead their case before the council, Mother Ayma. She is quiet, friendly, calm, but not cold. Open to new ideas, as shown by her adaptation to your society. She is not threatening, as so many humans seem to be. But I needed more. More? What more? I needed a hero. I swear to you, I did not expect so massive a hunter response. The human encountered by Counselor Jenkins easily dealt with the crew of a standard punter-pack ship. I thought to recreate the situation. Let Zhu prove herself a hero. Let her prove her loyalty to you. Restraint is easier to respect when you can glimpse the power behind it. Ayma found herself following his logic. It made sense, in a weird, distorted way. And now 16 of the crew are dead. You nearly killed us all. I'm trying to save us all, he roared. She couldn't keep up with the colors cycling along his sides. The humans are going to get loose, Mother Ayma. Escape is impossible. But to a human, the impossible is merely an inconvenience. And when they do, they'll want revenge. Revenge for all the families we threatened. A great shaggy arm pointed at her. We have to bring that shield down before their anger grows too concentrated. And when they emerge, the only way to defeat them will be the way Gao did. Not with fire, but with friendship. She stared at him, words eluding her. He dropped his arms, but said no more, his sides heaving as he breathed heavily. I understand your motivation, Furfeg, she said carefully, but this is not the way. Being human does not mean she is immune to fear. What if she had stayed in our quarters exactly as I had advised? Then we would have been lost, but merely sooner rather than later, he replied, his flanks the color of misery and resignation. The humans have many wise sayings, Mother Ayma. One is, courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. Another is humans are not born, they are made. I needed to make a hero. She sighed. And so you have. Her ears tilted in regret, realizing she was implicitly going along with his plan. His chromatic strips turned purple with sincere gratitude. Thank you, he said. His voice was still somber as he continued. We will need to guide this correctly, to put our actions in their best, proper light. The Gowans on board won't be an issue, but... He halted as his data tablet chimed with an incoming call. Grumbling, he walked over and tapped it. Yes? Ambassador Furfeg, this is the captain. I gathered that. What is it, your ticket? I'm in the middle of an important discussion. This is more important, Ambassador, the captain responded sharply, and Ayma's ears flicked in surprise at the tone. We've received a message, general broadcast, sent via the emergency notification system. What is the message? Message is as follows. Ultimatum from hunters. Demand all humans be turned over, else, quote, swarm of swarms, end quote, will raid known human locations. The captain hesitated. All ships, stations, carrying human passengers advised, jettison immediately. The message ends there. What? Ayma snarled. Ambassador, what are your instructions? Ambassador. Furfeg stabbed the tablet with a huge furry finger. His legs wobbled, and he slumped down on his bench. We're doomed, he said hollowly. Even if we bring down the shield, it'll look to the humans like we're just trying to save our own skins and feeding them to the swarm. And if we don't, we're doomed. Ayma spit. No, Furfeg, we're saved. Stand up. You wanted heroes? Now you have 7 billion of them. It's time to give them their chance. We can't possibly go to the council now, Ayma. I'm not even certain I can keep Zhu safe on this ship. She hesitated. Then we'll leave, she replied finally. To where? Back to Gao? She shook her head. No, I don't think even Zhu would allow it once she learns of this. We'll figure it out. Forgive me, but I think it's best if you don't know. He nodded. I understand. I'll have the captain's yacht loaded with as many nutrition spheres as it can hold, as well as medical supplies. The captain's yacht, Ayma said, surprised. It was a large shuttle down on the landing bay, normally intended for ferrying dignitaries. It was comfortable and long-range, ideal for their purposes, but are you allowed to give that to us? Furfeg's flanks flushed red. The Dominion can bill me. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am the Casual Deathworlder, your host, and this has been the Chang Saga, Chapter 4, Part 3 of 3. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit that like button, and maybe consider hitting the subscribe or follow button, depending on whether you are on YouTube or Rumble. Okay, first out of the gate, as always, is a huge shout out to my editor, Gregor. Thank you very much, buddy. I could not do this without you. And secondly is another huge shout out to Zren. Come back to us, man. We miss you. All right, then. We have one last chapter to go in the Chang Saga, Chapter 5, and that will probably be in, I believe, about 5 parts, because it's actually fairly long. However, there will be a chapter or two of the Deathworlders first. And yes, I am still considering doing salvage. I'm kind of afraid of that one, mostly because my Australian accent is laughably bad. And for those of you who listened to the last couple of chapters of Deathworlders, you know what I mean. Not that my Irish girl accent is all that good either, but it's the Australian that really gets me. Okay, question, who's got the question? All right. What is your all-time favorite comfort food? For me, that'd be pizza. Of course, that's probably for a lot of people. I mean, you can't go wrong with pizza. All right, leave your answers in the comments down below. In the meantime, I'll see you next time. Take care. Be safe. Bye-bye.